Welcome, everyone. We're here to talk about Microsoft Lens, and this is one of our digital access tips sessions. I'm going to, there we go, navigate here. Okay, so I want to start by saying that St. Mary's University is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by treaties of peace and friendship, and we are all treaty people. Microsoft Lens. So Microsoft Lens is a free document scanning app for both Apple or Android that can, and this is the important part, it's not just a scanning tool, it can convert images to file formats including PDF, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and more. It can digitize print and handwritten text, and it can read and translate a scanned document. So potential for educational use is quite wide, but just some highlights here are capture whiteboard at the end of a meeting or lecture, scan print text or handwritten materials or handwriting lecture notes and have them available for editing later. And it can copy text and tables from pictures. So I'm going to hand it over to Julian, who's going to provide us with a demo.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, so as Jim mentioned, it's a scanning product. You can convert images to all sorts of different file formats. I'm going to take you onto my phone here. And the first thing to do is to, well, once you've downloaded the Office Lens application to your mobile device, is then open it up. And you're met with this interface here. There you go, you get to see my room. And I thought I'd start off by kind of copying text from a textbook, and this is my old German book from a couple of years ago, and this would have been very useful probably a few years ago for this. And I'm just going to hide. You can see that when you start, oh, there we go. It starts to capture. Brilliant. Let's get that. Let's zoom straight in. So we can. So I've just captured that particular text, and I'll just crop it a little bit there, and confirm. And that should clean it up a little bit. So I've got that there. You can see at the bottom of my screen of my phone, I can add more pictures, I can add filters, I can crop. I even have some more options here as well, and so on. So, but I'm just going to click done with this one, and it takes me to this screen where I can share it to PDF. I can convert it to PDF. I can send it to my OneNote. So if I wanted to do that, if I just jumped in here, I can search my location. I've got a lot of OneNote books here. So let's see if I can find my, lots down here. Where's my personal notebook? Let's go in there. And maybe, oh, learning German. So I can put it in here and keep it in my OneNote. I won't do that for now. I'll just go back. I can save it to OneDrive, I can convert it to Word, I can convert it into a PowerPoint, and so on. But what I'll show you here is the immersive reader that comes with all Microsoft products. So as we're an Office 365 campus, the immersive reader is in all of those Microsoft applications. So if we just jump into this, and as it processes, shouldn't take very long. And there we go. You can see now it's the immersive reader is opened up and it's in German. So this is a great accessibility tool, something which would have been very useful for me a few years ago when I was doing German rather unsuccessfully, is what does it actually sound like? And so we'll see if you can hear my phone.
Seit Mai haben Sophie und Alexander ihr Auto. Es ist ganz neu.
That's very quiet.
Abziehen.
Let me see if I can. I'm not sure if you could hear that. Were you able to hear that?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, you were? Oh, great.
Yeah.
I have the audio turned off on my phone, so so we don't get any feedback. So that plays it through there. You can see it's a large text as well, but Immersive Reader actually gives us some other options as well. So I can make the text larger or smaller. I had cataract surgeries in the summer, so this actually came in really useful while I was leading up to that. If I just go back, you can see now it's a little bit smaller there, but it can be larger. Go back into our hamburger there. We can increase the spacing, change the font, we can change the background as well. make it a little bit easier on the eyes. And as I said, the Immersive Reader is available in all applications for Microsoft products. If you use Teams, if there are any posts or messages in Teams, you can use the Immersive Reader as well, which is very cool. What I like as well is you can highlight verbs and nouns. So as I was learning German here, I could highlight all of the verbs, go back, and there we go. That makes things nice and helpful for me. And what I kind of really like, and I use with my students as well, as they're all international, is you can actually translate the document. So if I wanted to know what this was all about, there we go. I've actually got it translated now into English. And it will even read it for me.
Sophie and Alexander have had their car since May. It's brand new. From the 10th of June.
There we go. So you can see that has kind of lots of possibilities for yourself, either as a faculty member, as a staff member, and also for students as well. So if, as a faculty member, if I'm looking at some articles, I can scan them, move them into a different format, and so on. And also translate things as well, which would also be great for traveling if we could ever do that again. Let me just come back out of this one. I'm not going to save it, so I'll delete this one. So it's from a textbook. Another thing it also does is, if I just move across here, I was teaching this morning, so I just made a couple of notes down here, handwritten notes. So I'm going to take a picture of that and just crop it a little bit. There we go. And confirm. And so what we can do here, once I press done, I should be able to, I can send that to Word. It's transferring, and there we go. That's now in a Word document. And also what I was trying to show, oh, I've done the wrong one. So at the bottom here, you can see you've got actions, document, whiteboard. So these different options of what you're taking. So if you're in a classroom, you can take a whiteboard. Actually, what I should have just done was actions here. So I'm going to do that again and take that picture. Just crop it a little bit and confirm. And now it will extract that actual data. There we go. You can see now this has been converted into text, and I can copy it at the bottom there, text copied. And then I could go to my different app. Maybe let's open the Notes app and start a new note. And I can paste it in. There we go. And we'll get rid of that little period. That's a really handy way of quickly taking your handwritten notes and converting them into text. The table format, there is that we mentioned before. I just discard that. There is an option of taking table, as you can see there, from text. I found that one to be less accurate. There's a step, once you've scanned it, it will ask you to start correcting things as you go through. And so I found that one to be less accurate at this point. But the other ones have been really, I find, quite useful and quite accurate. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing there. So that's kind of a very quick demonstration. I'll show you one more thing if I have time. Do I have some time, Jen?
You do.
Okay, so I'll just show you one more thing, just a video. If I go into this here, let's go to the next one. And this just shows you kind of how it's used kind of more in real time. So that kind of sums it up, really. It's a great little tool. I think whether it's faculty or for staff or for students, it's more for personal use, but can help you in many different situations. So happy experimenting.
Thank you for the demo. Does anybody have any questions? All right, I'm going to, since nobody jumped at that, I'm going to continue on here, and we'll leave time for questions at the end. All right, I'm going to pass this over. Now, I'm not sure if Amy or Patricia is going first, but
That'd be me, if everyone can hear me.
yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Julian, for showing us how Microsoft Lens works. So I'm just here to kind of talk about some considerations you might have when we're using this app. And it's basically, as this slide is aptly titled, don't forget about copyright. So copyright is something we always like to take into consideration when we're reproducing a work, if we're translating a work, if we're shifting format, or if we're sharing it with other people. Copyright applies once a work is put into a fixed form in Canada. So that can include notes, drafts, signs. It doesn't have to be something that has a copyright symbol, and it doesn't have to be registered in Canada to make it copyright protected. So we always want to assume that the work is protected by copyright unless we know differently. When we are making a copy, or which could be, like I said, a scan or a picture like we are here, or doing something different with it, we want to make sure there's some kind of a way that we are allowed to make that copy. And there's a few ways that happens. So the material could be in the public domain, and that's a bit different than things that are publicly accessible. Most things on the internet, well, free to use or free to look at, are still protected by copyright, but anything that has been 50 years plus from the death of the author or the creator is generally open as a public domain work and can be used pretty much however you want. And that's always something you can check with us in the Copyright Office. We're happy to talk about what happens in the public domain, and it is going to change with the new trade agreement that's coming into existence. So that'll be a bit of a change for us. Another way you can make a copy of a work is if it's something that's covered by a copyright exception. And there's a number of exceptions that are really applicable, especially if you're doing teaching or you're doing research. The one that most people are familiar with is fair dealing, which is 29 in Section 29, the Copyright Act, and that allows for you to make copies of materials for teaching, research, criticism, and things like that. It's kind of a vague exception. There's not a lot of guideline about what that looks like, but we're happy to talk about what the best practices generally are in an academic environment. There's also exceptions for creating copies or reproducing it to show to students if you're doing an online class or if you're teaching. And there's also exceptions that allow for private use. So if you're doing it for your private purposes and it's a scholarly or research kind of activity. The third way to do it is, if your work isn't falling under those two, is to get permission from the copyright holder. That can be verbal, but we usually ask that you do try to get it in writing. An email's fine. It doesn't have to be a formal letter, just something that explains how you're going to use the material and that the copyright holder has agreed to let you do so. And in the Copyright Office, we're pretty good at seeking permission, so we're happy to help you do that, or we're happy to help you walk through the steps. And keep in mind, this isn't legal advice, but we can always do a little discussion about best practices and our policies. The most important thing when you're making a scan or you're doing a translation or you're shifting your format is that you should really be careful with what you do with those scans. If it's for your private purposes, you're going to find more exceptions in the Copyright Act that allow you to do that, but you have to be careful when you share it with other people. Distribution can kind of invalidate some of the exceptions that we do use in the Copyright Act to cover our use. So we want to make sure that when we do share materials, we do have permission to make those copies and to share them. If it's for your own use, there's probably a lot more leeway. So give us an email if you're interested and we can kind of walk through that. When in doubt, ask. The Copyright Office is here. It's not just for faculty, we're for staff, we're for students, anyone in the community who wants some kind of information and some guidance. As I mentioned, we won't give legal advice. We're not qualified to do that, of course, but we do have some really great information on our LibGuide. We can talk about best practices and how we generally operate. And if it's something that you're using for students or for professors to share with students, we're really happy to take a look at it and make sure that if there's any clearance process that needs to happen or any kind of permission that needs to be given, we can take care of that on our end. And we do that as a course reading service. You can just give us a little email at copyright@smu.ca, and Amy and I are happy to talk about that. I think Amy's going to talk a little bit more about intellectual property in the classroom and in the academic environment, which is also kind of related to what we do in the Copyright Office and may require some extra consideration when making a scan.
One thing to consider, one of the first things that Julian highlighted at the start was that the ability to kind of capture a whiteboard, right? Notes on the board or handwritten notes maybe from an instructor or tutor or someone else. So it's really important to kind of think about that. I know I've gone to all sorts of conferences and I'm taking the screenshot of the slide on the screen. Well, what I was doing was capturing the intellectual property of that speaker. So it's something to consider, especially if you're helping any faculty members or putting together your presentations or writing on the whiteboard and you have students who will be able to use this, which I think is a huge asset to accessibility, is just to remember that that's your intellectual property on the screen. And so we've kind of been working through to get that language in. So we'll actually have that in their syllabuses, and students are aware that when they copy or download materials such as notes or presentations, that it is the faculty members' intellectual property. And the minute that a student or attendee starts sharing it on an open website, that's infringing, especially if there's no permission. So something to keep in mind with this, because that may be something that we encounter. Students may want to capture those whiteboard notes and share them broadly. And we know this is an issue. And so that's just something to keep in mind, that copyright is one end of it, but intellectual property and kind of protecting your role as an instructor is also important. And I think this is an amazing app. I'm just thinking back, I was a note taker in my undergrad and for students with varying disabilities, and this is huge to really be able to take handwritten notes, have them scanned, put into text, and be spoken to a student. So that's very cool. And we're here to help kind of walk through any of that process to make sure that we're honoring everyone properly, and that we're all able to kind of use the Act as it's intended for us in an academic setting. And yeah, we're here to help.
Thank you, Amy and Patricia. You should now be able to see the next slide, which is remember accessibility. So remember to create accessible documents using the accessibility checker feature. Accessibility is in PDFs requires a few extra steps, but it doesn't take long to do those. So please, by all means, make sure that you are using those features. If you're unsure of how to do that, please contact us here at the Studio for Teaching and Learning, and we'd be happy to help. We have a couple of resource links here, and I will try and put those in the chat for folks. Or it's actually just probably the LibGuide that I will add here. So I will just add that to the chat, and I will open the floor up for any questions.
I don't have any questions, and I have to run because I'm meeting with a student, but I just wanted to say thank you. This is a really cool app, and I think in terms of accessibility for students, it's super useful. So I'll keep it in my toolbox for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.